Do you imagine the 1970s as nothing more than avocado green refrigerators and endless shag carpeting? Think again. In the suburban American kitchens of that era, they were crafting some of the most creative, economical, and surprisingly hearty ground beef dishes imaginable. These authentic recipes were lifesavers for real families across America during a time marked by economic uncertainty, gas shortages, and skyrocketing grocery bills. Today, we're diving into 25 legendary ground beef recipes from the 70s. This is a true culinary legacy that kept entire families fed, happy, and coming back for second helpings, even when the nation faced challenging times.
Hamburger gravy with mashed potatoes. This isn't just a meal, it's history on a plate. It is a classic from the Great Depression era that became a true lifeline for working families in the 1970s when beef prices spiked dramatically. Families from Ohio to Oregon masterfully stretched 1 pound of ground beef to feed 6 hungry mouths. The secret was simple. Brown the meat in a heavy cast iron skillet. Then, right in the beef drippings, create a thickener by stirring flour into the fat until a buttery paste forms. Next, milk was poured in, transforming the mixture into a thick, pepper-rich gravy studded with pieces of meat. This was generously piled atop a comforting mountain of buttery mashed potatoes. This meal meant more than just sustenance. It meant Mom could still put dinner on the table even when Dad's paycheck didn't quite make it to the end of the month. The gravy permeated the potatoes, creating pockets of savory richness. Today's trendy, elevated comfort food wishes it had this kind of genuine soul.
Porcupine meatballs were one of those classic 1970s dishes that sounded strange but tasted unforgettable. Despite the playful name, no real porcupines were involved. The effect came from uncooked rice hidden inside the beef. As the meatballs cooked, the grains pushed outward, giving them their signature spiky look. These meatballs were a staple at community potlucks, school fundraisers, and Sunday church dinners all across small-town America. Families mixed ground beef with dry rice, finely chopped onion, and a single egg, shaping the mixture into hearty, palm-sized balls. Instead of expensive fresh ingredients, they relied on pantry staples, especially canned tomato soup, which served as the base for a rich, simmering sauce. As the meatballs slowly bubbled on the stovetop, the rice absorbed the tangy sauce, swelling inside the beef and creating a texture unlike anything else, soft, juicy, and slightly firm at the center. It was the kind of humble ingenuity that defined the era, turning two inexpensive ingredients into something that felt special enough for a weekend family dinner. Porcupine meatballs weren't just food, they were proof that creativity thrived even when budgets were tight.
Tater tot casserole represents the ultimate 1970s convenience food triumph. Known affectionately as hot dish in Minnesota, it was the perfect marriage of three beloved staples: ground beef, creamy mushroom soup, and those iconic golden cylinders of frozen potatoes. Although tater tots were first created in 1953 by Ore-Ida, by the 1970s they had become the star of every Midwestern casserole. The recipe was wonderfully straightforward. Brown the beef with onions, layer it in a 9x13 baking dish, pour over a can of creamy mushroom soup, and neatly arrange tater tots on top in precise rows. 40 minutes in a 350-degree oven transformed the dish into a bubbling, golden-topped masterpiece. Breaking through the crispy crust into the soft, savory filling beneath was a sensory delight and a signal that dinner was ready. This casserole appeared everywhere: church basements, neighborhood potlucks, family reunions, and even funeral receptions. It wasn't fancy, but it was comforting and satisfying, a true emblem of 1970s American ingenuity. Why complicate dinner when processed perfection could bring everyone together so effortlessly?
Old-school goulash.
better known as American chop suey, was the kind of dish every Midwestern grandmother made her own way. It wasn't true Hungarian goulash, but for millions of families, it was pure comfort. This one-pan meal saved countless weeknights when mom worked late and dinner had to be simple and fast. Born in post-war school cafeterias, it became a true home kitchen staple by the 1970s. Ground beef was browned with onions until rich and fragrant, then elbow macaroni, canned tomatoes, and whatever vegetables were on hand went straight into the same skillet. Everything cooked together, no extra dishes, no wasted time. The pasta soaked up the tomato beef juices, turning soft and deeply flavorful. That was the magic of this dish, its flexibility. Green peppers if you had them, corn if you didn't, maybe a little shredded cheese on top if payday was near. It bubbled on the stovetop, filling the house with the unmistakable smell of dinner almost ready. This wasn't fine dining, this was survival cooking, and somehow it always tasted like home.
Beef and macaroni skillet. Long before convenience brands dominated kitchens, American home cooks were creating their own one-pan wonders with ground beef and pasta. By the early 1970s, these skillet meals had become a weeknight lifesaver, combining simplicity, flavor, and economy. Start by browning the beef in a well-worn cast-iron skillet, breaking it into tender crumbles with a seasoned wooden spoon. Garlic powder added flavor. Fresh garlic was still a rarity in most suburban homes. Elbow macaroni joined the pan, along with beef broth or dissolved bouillon cubes, and a splash of ketchup or tomato sauce to tie it all together. As everything simmered, the pasta absorbed the rich, beefy juices, turning soft and deeply flavorful. The final touch? Shredded cheddar stirred in at the end, melting into gooey pockets that made each bite comforting and satisfying. This wasn't fancy cooking, it was practical, affordable, and delicious. The kind of meal that promised a warm kitchen and full bellies in just half an hour.
Shipwreck casserole. In the audacious kitchens of 1970s America, a dish called shipwreck casserole dared to combine the unexpected: ground beef, crushed potato chips, and creamy condensed soup. What may seem unusual today was a potluck sensation from Texas to Michigan, delivering a playful, indulgent experience for the whole family. Start by browning ground beef and mixing it with cream of mushroom or cream of chicken soup, forming a rich, savory base. Layer the mixture into a casserole dish. Then comes the signature twist: a whole bag of crushed potato chips, stirred in and sprinkled on top. Cheese, usually the pre-shredded orange kind, was optional but highly encouraged. Baked until golden, the chips on top retained a satisfying crunch, while the ones inside softened into starchy, savory pockets that perfectly absorbed the creamy sauce. Each bite was a texture adventure, crispy, creamy, meaty, and unapologetically over the top. Shipwreck casserole was more than a recipe. It was a celebration of 1970s creativity, resourcefulness, and the unabashed joy of processed foods.
Beef and cabbage skillet. During the mid-1970s, when grocery budgets were tight, cabbage became the quiet hero of American kitchens. At just 15 cents a pound, it stretched a small amount of ground beef into a hearty meal for an entire family. The cabbage tradition, brought by Irish and German immigrants generations earlier, now became a staple across households of every background during the economic downturn. Start by browning ground beef with onions in a trusty electric skillet, often a wedding gift, an avocado green, used daily. Once the meat released its fat, thick wedges of cabbage went into the pan, sizzling and softening as they absorbed the savory juices. A splash of Worcestershire sauce, a pinch of salt and pepper, and sometimes a can of tomatoes added extra depth for those feeling a little indulgent. As the cabbage wilted into tender, flavorful ribbons, it transformed modest ingredients into a rich, satisfying meal.
Served steaming hot, often with buttered white bread to soak up every drop of juice, this one-pan wonder was the ultimate 1970s comfort food. Simple, practical, and utterly delicious. Meatloaf muffins. In the hectic 1970s, home cooks discovered a clever shortcut, turning traditional meatloaf into muffin-sized portions. These little meatloaf muffins baked in just 25 minutes, making weeknight dinners manageable for busy families, juggling work, school, and extracurricular activities. The mixture combined ground beef, breadcrumbs soaked in milk, eggs, and finely diced onions, all sweetened lightly with ketchup. Instead of the long bake of a classic loaf, the batter was portioned into greased muffin tins, each muffin developing a caramelized crust all around. Kids loved them for their personal size and crispy edges, while moms appreciated that extra portions could be frozen for later. Fresh from the oven, the muffins were glazed with a sticky ketchup and brown sugar topping, slightly charred on top, giving each bite a perfect balance of sweet and savory. Served alongside instant mashed potatoes and canned green beans, these meatloaf muffins were the ultimate symbol of 1970s efficiency and practical comfort food. Beef and biscuit ring. In the 1970s, this dish was the ultimate illusion of effort. It looked like something meant for special guests, yet it was secretly simple enough for an ordinary weeknight. For the ambitious homemaker of that era, beef and biscuit ring was the perfect balance between style and convenience. The magic began with seasoned ground beef, browned with onions, filling the kitchen with that unmistakable savory aroma. Some cooks added a handful of corn or green beans for a pop of color and texture. While the filling rested, the real visual trick took shape. Refrigerated biscuit dough arranged in a perfect circle on a baking sheet, slightly overlapping to form a golden ring. The beef mixture was spooned into the center, and the biscuit edges gently folded over the filling, leaving a tempting window of meat visible in the middle. After just 30 minutes in a hot oven, the result looked like a magazine centerpiece. Flaky, golden biscuits wrapped around a rich, juicy beef core. The biscuits soaked up just enough of the beef juices to become tender and flavorful. When this dish hit the table, it looked like hours of work, but the truth was far simpler. A quick assembly, a tossed-away biscuit tube, and suddenly, dinner felt like an event. This was classic 1970s entertaining, bold presentation, clever shortcuts, and absolutely no apologies.
Porcupine rice bake. While porcupine meatballs slowly bubbled away on stovetops across America, their oven-baked cousin offered a quieter, hands-free solution for overwhelmed 1970s kitchens. Porcupine rice bake was made for working mothers who didn't have time to stand over a pan but still needed to feed a family. The idea stayed clever and simple. Uncooked rice was mixed straight into ground beef, creating those signature quills as the grains expanded during cooking. But instead of rolling dozens of meatballs, the entire mixture was pressed into a single casserole dish, saving time and effort. The real magic happened with the sauce. Tomato soup diluted with water was the everyday choice, while tomato sauce blended with beef bouillon signaled a special night. Covered tightly with foil, the casserole baked low and slow for nearly an hour. Inside, the rice drank up the tangy liquid, swelling and pushing through the meat like edible pins. For the final stretch, the foil came off. The surface browned slightly, forming a gentle crust that added contrast to the soft interior. Served with a crisp side salad and buttery garlic bread, this dish sent a quiet message. Even on the most exhausting days, dinner was still under control, at least for tonight.
Beef jambalaya bake. In the 1970s, Americans explored regional flavors while keeping Midwestern practicality. Beef jambalaya bake was a simplified oven version of Louisiana's classic rice dish. Traditional jambalaya required hours to prepare, but this casserole baked in 45 minutes, still capturing some Creole essence. Ground beef was browned with the Holy Trinity: bell peppers, onions, and celery. Many recipes used dried onion flakes for convenience. Canned tomatoes and white rice were added, and Lipton's onion soup mix often replaced homemade stock and seasoning. The mixture baked covered until the rice was tender. Not authentic New Orleans jambalaya, but flavorful, hearty, and different from usual weeknight meals. This casserole reflected 1970s American cooking, curiosity about regional tastes, combined with convenience and comfort.
Hamburger biscuit bake was a classic 1970s comfort food that married ground beef and refrigerated biscuit dough in a simple, clever way. Unlike the biscuit ring, this dish layered all components in a single casserole, letting fluffy biscuits absorb the rich juices from the savory beef below. The decade-loved convenience elevated through smart assembly. To prepare, cooks browned ground beef with cream of mushroom soup, optionally adding frozen mixed vegetables for color and a touch of nutrition. This mixture was evenly spread in a 9 by 13-inch casserole dish. The biscuits were torn into quarters and placed on top like a savory cobbler. Some recipes brushed them with melted butter and sprinkled with garlic powder, details that separated ordinary cooks from the skilled. During baking, the biscuits puffed into golden clouds while soaking in the beefy gravy beneath, creating a perfect contrast: crispy, buttery tops with tender, sauce-soaked undersides. Every bite was a harmony of textures and flavors. This dish showed that you didn't need culinary school, just a thoughtful combination of ingredients and an eye for comfort food geometry.
Mock prime rib patties. In the 1970s, when prime rib was too expensive, families created mock prime rib patties, a clever way to make everyday ground beef feel special. Ground beef mixed with breadcrumbs, Worcestershire sauce, garlic powder, and liquid smoke gave the illusion of slow-roasted flavor. Thick patties were seared until crusty, then finished with a mushroom sauce thinned with red wine or beef broth. Served on plates with roasted potatoes and canned asparagus, they weren't real prime rib, but felt luxurious. Appearing at birthdays and family celebrations, these patties symbolized creativity, dignity, and making the most of limited resources.
Beef and potato hash casserole. In the 1970s, beef and potato hash casserole turned convenience into comfort. Ground beef replaced traditional corned beef, and frozen hash browns made preparation fast. Within 10 minutes, everything went from package to casserole dish. Browned beef mixed with thawed hash browns, cream of celery soup, sour cream, and shredded cheddar cheese, then topped with crushed cornflakes and melted butter for a crunchy finish. An hour in the oven transformed it into a golden, bubbling meal, with creamy potatoes inside and crispy edges outside. Hearty beef and crunchy topping made each bite satisfying. Families sometimes served it with fried eggs on top, embracing breakfast for dinner fun. This dish perfectly captured the 1970s spirit: tasty, practical, and unapologetically flexible.
Beef tamale pie was an architectural take on comfort food. Think of it as shepherd's pie's American cousin, swapping lamb for ground beef, and layering in corn because, in the 1970s, Americans loved corn in everything. Ground beef was browned with onions, then mixed with frozen vegetables or just corn and peas, bound together with a simple beef gravy made from drippings, flour, and bouillon. This savory mixture filled a deep pie dish, forming the foundation. Mashed potatoes, leftover or instant, were spread on top like a dome, decorated with fork tines and finished with a pat of butter. In the oven,
The potato topping turned golden and fluffy, protecting the bubbling filling beneath. Cutting through the potato crust into the rich, meaty interior was deeply satisfying. A full meal for four, under $3. Practical, filling, and unmistakably 1970s.
Hamburger spoon-bread casserole. In the 1970s, this dish stood at the crossroads of Southern tradition and Midwestern casserole creativity. Spoon-bread had always been softer than cornbread and richer than pudding, but pairing it with ground beef turned it into something entirely new. Cooks browned beef with onions and a touch of green chilies, spreading the mixture into a buttered baking dish. Then came the magic, a pourable cornmeal batter made with milk, eggs, and melted butter that settled over the meat like a warm blanket. As it baked, the top puffed into a golden crust while the inside stayed silky and spoonable. Beneath, the beef and cornmeal fused into a cozy mixture that tasted like comfort and heritage at the same time. Southerners recognized their roots, and Midwesterners claimed it as another casserole classic. It didn't need a clear category. It just needed a spoon.
Homemade sloppy joes became a beloved 1970s tradition, inspired by school cafeteria sandwiches, but made heartier at home. Ground beef, browned with onions and green peppers, created a rich, savory foundation. The sauce, a blend of ketchup, brown sugar, yellow mustard, Worcestershire sauce, and a splash of vinegar, simmered until thick and irresistibly sloppy. Some cooks added tomato paste or hot sauce for extra flavor. Piled high on soft hamburger buns, messy and satisfying, and served with potato chips and pickles, these sandwiches were weekend lunch perfection. They symbolized casual, comforting American meals, bringing families together around the table in the era of convenience and creativity.
Beef enchilada casserole was the moment when 1970s America thought it had discovered Mexican food, but really discovered convenience layered into a baking dish. It wasn't authentic, not even close, but it was bold, comforting, and exciting for families who had never tasted anything spicier than ketchup. It began with ground beef sizzling in a pan, seasoned with a packet of taco mix, Old El Paso or Lowry's, whichever brand ruled that particular kitchen. Canned enchilada sauce followed, mild enough that kids wouldn't flee the dinner table. Then came the architecture. Strips of corn tortillas layered like edible shingles, topped with beef, canned refried beans, and mountains of cheddar, the only Mexican cheese suburban supermarkets reliably carried. Layer after layer, the casserole grew taller, heavier, and more fragrant. In the oven, the magic happened. The tortilla strips softened into something between noodles and chips. The cheese melted into bubbling golden blankets that made the whole house smell like taco night. And the toppings? Sour cream, shredded iceberg lettuce, chopped tomatoes, and canned black olives. The holy quartet of Midwestern Mexican cuisine. Authentic? No. Loved? Completely. This casserole brought new flavors to cautious 1970s families, while staying firmly inside the borders of comfort food.
Beef and bean burrito bake. Following the enchilada casserole, beef and bean burrito bake brought a simplified Mexican flavor to Midwestern tables. Burritos were popular, but rolling dozens for dinner was time-consuming. This casserole layered ground beef with taco seasoning, canned beans, and cheese between tortillas, then topped with enchilada sauce and more cheese. The oven turned it into a lasagna-like dish with soft, saucy layers and a slightly crispy top. Each slice showed the distinct layers, making it a hit at potlucks, church suppers, and neighborhood dinners. Americans adapted these flavors into a convenient, family-friendly format.
Beef stuffed peppers were a family favorite in the 1970s, simplified for quick weeknight meals rather than special occasions. Bell peppers were halved and seeds removed, forming little edible boats. They were briefly parboiled to ensure even cooking. The filling mixed browned ground beef with quick-cooking rice, canned tomato sauce, diced onions, and a choice of seasonings like Italian herbs or garlic powder. Each pepper was stuffed generously, arranged in a baking dish with a bit of water to steam, and baked until tender with slightly charred edges. In the final minutes, shredded mozzarella melted on top, creating a gooey, golden finish. Each pepper served as a ready portion, elegant enough for guests, but perfect for a family dinner, combining wholesome vegetables with hearty flavors.
Sloppy Joe pie. When a simple sloppy Joe wasn't special enough for Sunday dinner, home cooks created the Sloppy Joe pie. The familiar sweet, tangy beef filling was layered into a casserole dish and topped with cornbread batter, turning a cheap meal into something that felt warm and festive. The beef was browned with onions, mixed with ketchup, Worcestershire sauce, and a touch of brown sugar. Instead of serving it on buns, the mixture was covered with fluffy cornbread batter and baked until golden. As it rose, the cornbread absorbed just a bit of the beef juices, staying tender and rich. What came out of the oven looked like a real centerpiece. Simple, comforting, and perfect even when money was tight. Served with a quick salad or canned green beans, it made any family dinner feel like a small celebration.
Shipwreck casserole. The name says everything. This dish was invented on nights when groceries were running low and families had to rely on whatever the pantry still offered. Ground beef was stretched with canned vegetables like corn, green beans, or tomatoes, then flavored with onion soup mix and a bit of cream soup to hold it together. The magic came from the topping, a thick layer of crushed potato chips that baked into a golden, salty crust kids always fought over. It was simple, comforting, and surprisingly delicious for a meal born from necessity. Shipwreck casserole became a favorite because it turned scraps into something that tasted like home and effort, even when there wasn't much to work with.
Salisbury steak. Before TV dinners turned it into a bland freezer box memory, Salisbury steak was a small miracle of creativity and thrift. Originally inspired by Dr. James Salisbury, who insisted beef held almost medicinal value, the dish became beloved because it made a single pound of ground meat feel like a full steakhouse meal. The secret wasn't fancy meat, but technique. Breadcrumbs, an egg, and just a little milk transformed basic ground beef into firm, generous patties that looked like real steaks on the plate. Hand-shaped into ovals and seared until richly browned, the patties were set aside while onions slowly softened into deep golden sweetness. Then came the magic. A silky brown gravy built right in the same pan using beef drippings and flour. The kind of sauce that tasted like a Sunday roast, even on a weeknight. Resourceful home cooks often made extra patties and froze them for busy evenings. Children never questioned it. They truly believed they were being served steak. And, in a way, they were. Just not the expensive kind from the butcher, but the working-class version made with equal parts love, skill, and necessity.
Corn chip beef bake. The corn chip beef bake was a clever invention born from making the most of what was on hand. Ground beef was cooked until golden and mixed with a medley of Mexican-inspired flavors, chili powder, cumin, or a simple taco seasoning packet. Canned beans, corn, and diced tomatoes added bulk and nutrition, stretching the meal further. This mixture was poured into a casserole dish and topped with crushed corn chips and any available cheese. Baking transformed it into a golden, bubbling delight where crispy chips contrasted with tender beef beneath. Paired with a simple lettuce and tomato salad,
This dish brought a festive spirit to the dinner table, showing that ingenuity often arises from using everyday pantry staples.
Hamburger soup and beef chili. The ultimate comfort foods of the 1970s, hamburger soup and beef chili brought warmth and flavor to any table. Hamburger soup combined ground beef, fresh vegetables, and a rich, savory broth, sometimes enriched with barley or pasta to make it stretch for the whole family. A touch of tomato sauce added tang, while slow simmering let the flavors meld perfectly. Leftovers only got better the next day. Beef chili, meanwhile, was a hearty, crowd-pleasing classic. Simple, yet flavorful, it blended ground beef, beans, tomatoes, and chili powder, warming hearts on cold days. Each family added its own twist, but the essence remained the same. A dish that could feed many, comfort deeply, and make any gathering feel cozy. Together, these recipes showcase the ingenuity and warmth of 1970s American kitchens, turning simple ingredients into memorable meals.